What's up, guys? Sub-Zeric here, back not for another VOD review. This is going to be a fundamentals overview video, especially as we are going into set 18. I feel like this is the best place for me to make these type of videos where, this is something that's going to be relevant if you're watching this video, right as it releases before set 18, or if you're watching this video, before set 30 or during set 30. Hopefully this will be as relevant as it is right now. I'm going to try to keep it as general as possible. There's some examples that are relevant to the current meta, but you can always generalize it to the specific meta. The other thing that I'll say before we get into it is that I gave a much more long form, much more in-depth version of this talk to my Tactician University members. Link in the description down below at my Metafy. We have been doing a lot of these style sessions, and if you subscribe, you get access to all the previous sessions. And we're also going to do one Giga session right after PBE comes out, and then we'll be doing weekly sessions during PBE. So go check it out if you're interested, especially going into set 18, people wanting to, play in the next TFT Open, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so preamble done. What are we talking about today? Today we are talking about line selection. What is line selection? It's choosing what comp you want to play, what path you want to go down, and it doesn't have to be, I start the game on 2-1 and I decide what I'm going to play and I lock in on that forever. It can be a lot more than that, and we will get through it as we talk through the presentation. So, in my opinion, this is the most important skill in TFT. I think if you had Dish Soap, Wage and Iverson sitting down in a chair next to you, and all they said was, play this line from this spot, take this augment, play this line, your win rate would go up way more than any other point of information that they could give you. It's just incredibly valuable to have direction in the right way. This is also a skill where if you pick the right line, you can go from averaging like a 6 to averaging like a 3. There's just a huge gap in averages in what your game looks like with a good game plan and a bad game plan. And that's what this is at the end of the day. It's what is your game plan and how does that make sense with what your spot is. So fundamentally, how do you pick a line? Well, the big idea is essentially you slowly reduce the subset of playable lines until you reach the best one. So like in an ideal world, main idea is there's, all these different comps that exist out here. Say there's like 10, 20 different viable comps. And then you start checking off, okay, well, I can't play this comp. I can't play this comp. I have AP items, so I can't play all these AD comps. I took like a reroll augment, so I want to play like a reroll comp. And then you slowly narrow it down until you figure out exactly what your line is. Now, this isn't super practical, and it kind of comes at it from the opposite direction. The other thing that you can do is you can just look for signifiers that play into multiple lines and then narrow those down. And I have this example here. This is a set 17 example, but the example exists in every set is you build a red buff and you say, okay, what comps can I play? Well, I need a unit that really likes the attack speed from red buff and that can apply red buff. And so in this set we have Jinx, Kindred, Xayah, and Vex. These are all units who are quite happy to hold red buff. And so if you build a red buff, you're happy to play into any of these lines. These are all lines that you would like to play. And then you can start checking things off from there. So say 4 lines in my head, these are things that I can play. Well, maybe I, have an early mountain, so I can play towards Xayah. Maybe I have a reroll-oriented augment, so I can play towards 2-cost reroll. I can play Jinx. This is fundamentally how line selection works, and I think a lot of people understand this. But where people fall is in considering all the different possibilities, all of the different factors that go into line selection. And so we're going to talk through a lot of these here, but these are all the different pieces of data that you can take in and figure out, okay, like what does it mean to, pick my line, and what should I be considering when picking my line? And I oftentimes like to think about TFT as kind of like a math equation, a lot of decisions in TFT like a math equation. And you want as many pieces of data in that math equation as possible, because it will help you get closer to like the real results. Say you're building like I guess the idea is like a model, right? Say you're building like a model of the world. You want as much data as possible and as much of different points of data as possible so that you can create as accurate a model as possible and then use that model to predict what your behavior should be. And that's essentially what line selection is you're modeling out in your head what the game will look like, and then you are going based on that. So let's get into it. So meta is the first one here. This is once again a current meta, but a screenshot of TFT Academy right now with all of the different comps that exist out there. And what's interesting about this meta is it's a pretty broad meta. there's a lot of different viable lines, different lines, at 4 cost, different lines at 1 cost, 2 cost, 3, all different cost levels are quite viable. 4 cost is, dominant, but in a balanced meta, that's pretty reasonable. There's some conditional lines, there's some non-conditional lines. This is a quite balanced meta, and we'll talk later about how this isn't really the norm, and abnormal metas lead you to have to make different decisions. So, what you should ask when you are thinking about a meta like this, these are a few things that you can say when you jump into a game, like and especially when you look at something like TFT Academy, when you look at like Meta TFT, something like that, and look at boom, 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 here are all the comps that exist here. These are the things that you should think about, and this can really inform your game plan. So first of all, how strong is Reroll, and what does this do to tempo? The idea is that the more that lower cost Reroll dominates, the more that tempo is skewed towards that cost of Reroll. And I'll give you an example. Say that the meta revolves completely around 2 cost Reroll. There's like a bunch of really, really dominant 2 cost Reroll lines. Well, even then, if you're playing 4 cost, you're very likely to have to roll a bit during stage 3 because all the 2 cost reroll players are going to spike on 3-2. That's just how 2 cost reroll works. You get to go to level 6 on 3-2, and then you can roll down and spike and hit a bunch of upgrades. If you then do not spike your board on 3-2 with all of these other players, you're going to take an insane amount of damage. So in those types of metas, even then if you're playing 4 cost or if you're playing some other kind of line, it becomes beneficial to roll a little bit on 3-2. And so you should always be thinking about this. The more that reroll dominates, the more that the tempo skews earlier, and the more that you have to actually like make decisions that allow you to play the game at those earlier levels. And the more that 4 cost dominates, the less that you have to do that. And especially in this third bullet point, we can talk about that as well. How's the balance between AD and AP? This just does interesting things to items, especially, going into future sets where we will have carousel back. If you are in a meta that it's heavily dominated by AP, if you take a rod off carousel, not only are you getting that rod, but you're denying that rod from other people. And so this can mean that, if there's something really, really dominant where you need to play towards a specific item, this can make loss streak better, where, say and I'll talk about this with game warping as well. Say the entire meta is dominated by people, taking tiers and building blue buffs. Hasn't been like this in a long time, but in a world where blue buff is a really, really dominant item, loss streaking becomes a lot better because you want a loss streak, get that first tier, and then get to another tier from there. And so that will, the more that it's balanced, the less you feel bad about, winning fights and being okay just kind of getting whatever off carousel. This next one is also really, really important. How wide is the meta, and what does this do to roll timings in econ? The more narrow a meta is, the more contested you are likely to be in a narrow meta, and then the more that econ becomes valuable. We saw this a lot in set 17, where we had the Master Yi Corki meta, where there was a patch where essentially, a huge percentage of lobbies were Master Yi and Corki, these 2 4-cost lines. What this meant is econ became super, super, super premium because you needed to have gold so that you could roll ahead of the other players. The normal roll timing for 4-cost lines is like a 4-2 level and roll it down. In this meta, it became 4-1. It became double econ into 3-7 it, so you can roll ahead of these players. And that's not going to be the last, 4-cost contested dominant meta where there's like a few dominant 4-cost lines. So you should know that if you look at, something like a TFT Academy and there's like multiple S tier 4-cost lines, or you go to Meta TFT and you see, okay, there's a couple lines that with like over a 1.0 average play rates, that there's multiple people per line contesting these lines, then you should know that econ augments become a lot better in these type of metas because they allow you to then roll ahead of the other players and hit in these contested metas. And the last thing, almost kind of similarly related to this, is, are there any game warping comps? This can do really interesting things to itemization, and I actually have my example here because I'm trolling. But if you guys remember Syndra, set 14 Syndra, this unit, and if you didn't, this was a 2-cost unit that was so dominant, and this is mostly a meme screenshot, but not actually that inaccurate. Where because this unit was so dominant, you could basically play her in any line and she was super premium. What this also meant is that items like Winsu's Rageblade, Shojin onto her, Nashor's, any item that would get her casting, just to simplify it, was really valuable onto her. And that meant very often it was beneficial for you to sack to early carousel, get your bow for Guinsu's Rage Blade, your rod for Guinsu's, your tear for Shojin, anything like that, and start getting those items onto her. And so when there is a comp like this that is super, super game warping because it's that strong, this also oftentimes will benefit Lost Streak strategy because you can pick these specific items that you want. And if you don't Lost Streak, this is the other thing. Like I talked about before, if everyone in the lobby is trying to pick up that Guinsu's Rage Blade, then if you don't Lost Streak, you are never in a million years going to get that bow, or similarly with the tier for Shojin. So think about this when you are considering what you know, the lines exist in the meta right now and how to play around them. Okay. Items are always important, right? If you see a 3-item start, you're usually seeing around 50% of your items until mid-stage 3. You know, Krog's going to give you 2 to 3 items. You're going to get an item off carousel, and then you're going to get another item stage 3 carousel. This is important direction because it's boom, 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 already 3 of your items. But this... what you have to make and what you do with those items varies greatly depending on win streak or loss streak. So obviously, if you're win streaking, you feel really good about immediately making a slam. Like if your plan is to play for win streak, you almost essentially have to make that early slam. If you're playing for a loss streak, this means that you don't feel bad about just, you know, holding these items, and you still want them to be good direction wise, right? You don't want to start off with like sword bow and be like, well, I don't have to slam these right now, so I'll have like no plan for sword bow. But what you do want to do is think about the fact that, you know, if I'm playing for streak, I need to slam these items. If I'm not playing for streak, I don't need to slam these items. So think about that. When you are looking at your items as a source of direction, it's okay if you're going to play a lost streak strategy if you don't have a slam immediately. I think a lot of people think that they need to immediately slam an item, or vice versa. A lot of people think, oh, I don't need to slam an item because, you know, I want to greed for my perfect items, which... if you're playing a lost streak, that's okay, but I think a lot of players go too much in that direction and never slam anything. And then, you know, we talked about this already, the game warping items. Okay, on contesting, this is really interesting. When I started playing TFT, I never wanted to contest or be contested because I thought, well, this is just always bad. You know, some of your units are being taken out of the pool. It just makes life really, really hard. And you would always prefer not to be contested in pretty much every single scenario out there. But how bad the contest is varies greatly on who has the ability to roll first and who has the more resources. So, you know, the example is I have a prismatic ticket and I'm playing a 2-cost reroll and you have some kind of combat augment. I don't feel that bad that you're contesting me because on 3-2, I'm going to send it, find maybe like 6 copies of my 2-cost, and you're going to be sitting here on 2 copies, 3 copies. And it's just going to be very, very hard for you to hit. Any econ augment that allows you to roll first makes contesting someone else feel honestly fine, you know, not too bad. And you can oftentimes send these people bot 4 or bully them off the comp if they're smart and they say, oh crap, this guy has pris ticket, I'm going to, you know, not play this comp. The only thing I will say about this last point is it is elo dependent. The lower elo you are, the less people are going to do this. And also, this point as well on avoiding meta lines. Also, I guess I'm realizing that my head is like covering some of these stuff, so maybe I should move my head over here. Sorry. But this is this other thing on avoiding meta lines. This is something else that I did a lot when I was a new player in TFT. Is I'd be like, I don't want to play the broken meta lines because like I'm better than that. I am just going to be the person who plays the uncontested line, has a good spot for it, and you know it's great. A few things about this. One is that, you know, a contested S tier line can sometimes be better than an uncontested B tier line, depending on how strong that line is. We've seen this a lot before. And the other thing is, if you are the person who you will never play this really, really strong line, then you're going to miss the ability to play it sometimes. Say this line is, you know, there's a really, really broken line and you get to play it like 1 in 10 games. If you just opt out to those 1 in 10 games, it's very likely that 1 in 10, if the line is broken enough, is going to be a first. So just be open to be playing really, really strong lines. Back to the point about bullying other people offline. When you have a good spot for it, you should be playing it. And you can oftentimes bully other people out who have worse spots. However, if you were the person who is, you know, never open to playing the broken lines, then you're never going to play it and you're never going to end up in a spot for it. So just be open to playing broken lines. Don't be like me, the hipster TFT player who never wants to play the strong stuff. Win streak versus loss streak. This is really interesting, and I think a lot of people don't think about this, is that whether you win streak or loss streak already cuts off or makes viable a lot of different lines. So lose streak, the idea behind lose streak is you must have a plan for when to spike. Ideally before 4-2. Oftentimes when I'm in a loss streak, I'll be happy to play stuff like 2-cost reroll, or like 3-cost comps that like spike hard on 3-5. The idea being, it really hurts to 10 loss, 11 loss straight up to 4-2. The only times when 11 lossing into 4-2 has been viable is when there are really, really strong 4-cost lines that you can stabilize on disgustingly hard on 4-2. That mean that you were like essentially not going to lose a fight, all of stage 4 and early stage 5. That has to be the case. And if that's not the case, then you're not getting that much value out of, that full loss streak there. So really be thinking about when you're loss streaking, when am I actually going to spike? And the earlier you can spike and the earlier you can crack that loss streak, oftentimes the better, because it means you aren't running the risk of just taking a free bot 4. Win streak means that you're not going to have access to specific items, and you're potentially going to have access to a lot more econ HP. The obvious example is that win streak opens off fast 9, because if you can win streak, 10 streak the game, you have a lot of HP, so you can sack that stage 4 and then go straight to 9 stage 5. It also means that you oftentimes have a bunch of extra gold, because if you're maintaining a 3 streak for that long, you're in a really, really good spot. So think about what lines you have available to you because of your win streak or because of your loss streak. Augments. This is obvious, but you can't reroll augments after you take them. So this is one of the biggest factors that locks you into a comp. The main thing to think about, I think, is think about what your comp really needs. And we'll talk about this with some things later, but what does my comp want? Am I playing fast 9? Okay, if I'm playing fast 9, then my comp needs a lot of gold. The most obvious example, I need econ augments. If I'm playing like a lower cost reroll line that has a lot of different units to itemize, what does that comp really need? It needs items, because I'm going to hit my units pretty quickly. They're pretty cheap, but I need to get multiplicative power on a 3-star unit. If I have a 3-star unit just sitting here with no items on it, then what's the point? If I can get to 3 items really quickly, that multiplies the power really, really hard. So just think when, and in general about all the lines in the meta, what do these comps need to succeed? What is something that can either multiply the strength of the comp or cover up the weakness of the comp? These are the two things oftentimes to think about in TFT. Is my comp has a ton of frontline, what do I need? Some kind of inevitability backline, a scaling item, scaling augment, that kind of stuff. And also, I'm going fast 9, I have a lot of power in all of my units. How can I play for that even further? Well, best case scenario, get items onto them or get like really, really strong combat augments that work with me being level 9. And the other thing is to scout before picking your augment, or to slam pick. You can slam pick to try to scare people off. If you take like a double trouble type augment, and there's one double trouble comp, you can just slam pick that and encourage other people to not play it. I will say this is better the higher elo you go. If you are like GM and above, really more like challenger into like competitive, this becomes more viable, just slam picking, and especially in tournament, it's pretty reasonable. Prior to that, a lot of people just aren't going to scout, I'll say. Portal. The main thing to think about with Portal is not just how this changes your game plan, but how it changes the game plan for the lobby as a whole. If you were in something like a gold subscription, the whole lobby will often be thinking, oh, I can potentially go fast 9 from here because I have all this extra gold to work with. What does that mean? It actually means a lot of times the tempo gets weaker in the early game, because all these people are thinking about fast 9, and so they are not building, putting a bunch of investing their gold into the early game. They are, trying to not roll it all and then just make it straight to 9. So just really think about like what does this portal actually do, not just to my spot, but to everybody's spot. This is power curves, which is a discussion that I did with my TAC University people. But the best players will understand where the lobby is right now and then where it is going. So, back to that example of, the everybody going fast 9. It's interesting to think about, like, what does that do to the early game, and what does that do to your line selection? Because the perfect example is this game that Wigwug, my tier 1 goat, played, and hopefully in 50 sets he'll still be tier 1. But the perfect example is he saw a lobby with a lot of aura farming players. The people are going to get a 2-star 5 cost on stage 4. Because he knew that the lobby was going to spike really, really hard stage 4, he opted to play for more of a win streak in stage 2 and stage 3, even though he had calculated loss in a game. This was a game in regionals. Played win streak, calculated loss, because he knew he was going to lose stage 4. And so he said, I'm not going to be able to win stage 4, even if I do take this calc loss all the way to there. So I might as well win stage 2, stage 3, and then start losing stage 4. So moving your game plan around based on the rest of the lobby is paramount. It is super, super important. Line databases. These websites like TFT Academy and stats websites are really, really good in general, just to have like a base understanding of like the comps that exist out there. But you really need to understand comps deeply. And so this is my list of a million different questions that you can ask yourself to actually really understand how a comp works. And I'm already at 20 minutes, so I don't want to take this too long here. But to go through them through really quickly. Is this an expensive board or a cheap board? I think a lot of people will try to play comps that they just do not have enough gold to get to. If a comp plays a lot of 4-cross and 5-cross on the board, it's going to be very expensive. There are also sometimes traits in TFT that say, maybe you only field this in set 17, we had like mech, where you're only fielding, 6 units on that board. It's a lot easier to play that type of board with less gold because you only have to buy 6 units. And this happens a lot where there'll be some kind of trait that does this. And the reverse can happen with items. How well can this comp use extra items? Almost every set, pretty much every set, there is a comp, a vertical that gives you extra items. A lot of times this means that you don't need to prioritize items that highly because you're going to very easily get to 3-item carry, 3-item tank. Is the board emblem reliant? You can look into the stats and see this. This is really, really good to understand, like, do I need an emblem to play this line or do I not? Do I not need it? And oftentimes just throw the trait into like Explorer and then filter it with or without the emblem and see how much the average changes. How concentrated is the power of this comp? This is a really, really good one. Reroll comps, oftentimes, a lot of their power is concentrated in a couple of units. Oftentimes, level 8 comps, and this varies with other comps, have their power spread out. You have like maybe 2 4-cost carries on your board, a 4-cost tank, a 3-cost tank as well, maybe a tertiary 3-cost carry, and you can say, my power is actually quite spread out in this line. There's actually a lot of units that I feel good about itemizing. What a very concentrated power comp does, so, say something like set 17 Mighty Mech, where, you have boom, giant tank, boom, giant carry, and those are the only 2 units on your board. That oftentimes means that Radiants are a lot better, Artifacts are a lot better, Lost Streak traits, if they give you items, are a lot better, because that further concentrates the power in one unit. And oftentimes, an example like Mighty Mech, where 1 unit is 2 units, if you ever have a trait like that, then Radiant items, Artifacts are always amazing on those guys because you're essentially getting a Radiant onto 2 items. Is this a win-out comp? And then what is the power curve for this comp? This is something to ask. Usually, the sign of a win-out comp is a comp that does very, very well in the late game. You see it all the time, just like win streaking. Stage 5 usually can push level 9, level 10, and add units that are like really, really powerful additions. You can also just look at the statistics, right? Go to a meta TFT and say, what is the win rate of this comp? And if it has a high win rate, it's a win rate comp. That really changes how you play, right? Because if you are playing one of these win-out comps, you can do the like full loss streak into play this line, and then boom, win out from there. Extra units on this comp. This is things like new recruit or augments that allow you to play extra units. And this is also what is the value of pushing an extra level. I'll oftentimes see people kind of like in coaching, they'll just kind of like, push an extra level, or, vice versa. They'll like spend all their gold like rolling on a certain level. And the calculation for that should not be like, what does this gold do now? It should also be, what does my next level do? Some lines, if you add an extra level, you can get a hugely impactful unit in there. Some lines, their traits are just like beautiful at level 7 or 8, and then adding an extra unit doesn't really do anything. Does this comp want fast fights or slow fights? This is a hard one to tell sometimes, but usually just think about like, what are the traits that I'm playing? Do I have traits that scale over time? Traits that say like every 5 seconds your units heal, get extra stats, that kind of stuff. And also like, do I have heavy burst units? Heavy like burst units usually want to play for quick fights because they want to just blow people up. Assassins usually as well want to just blow people up. How does this comp want to position? This is a hard one, and honestly, I'll do a whole thing on positioning. But just, thinking about your positioning can actually impact your line selection, interestingly enough, because if you have a line that, is very much front to back, it can get countered by comps that, assassinate backliners and that kind of stuff. And that means that, maybe that there's gonna be multiple people in the lobby who are gonna play a comp that's good into yours because you want to position a certain way and they want to position opposite that. Okay, maybe you don't play that line. how popular is this comp? Goes back to our earlier discussion. The more popular it is, the more gold you need to hit it. And then lastly, does this comp have conditions? Why? I can't get through all this in a few minutes, but it's the idea here is essentially, are there certain enablers that make this comp much stronger? Specific augments, specific artifacts, specific anything like that. And usually the why is that the comp, the neutral power level is weak enough that you don't normally play it, but with this certain broken combination, it becomes really, really strong. And really interrogating that is very, very valuable. Understanding, okay, this item, this artifact, specific artifact makes my comp really strong. That is because this comp really revolves around having a very strong, carry with this artifact, that kind of stuff. But yeah, that is it that I have for this. Let me know what you guys thought of this type of video. I want to do more of these type of like guide type videos, especially going into the new set. But hey, set 18 drops on PBE in under a week at this point, so we're getting very, very close. I'll probably do some VOD reviews of worlds and stuff like that, and then we are full into set 18 mode. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, please like this video. Helps the channel out a lot. Comment down below, what did you think of this format? Any criticism, any positive criticism, negative criticism. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out my Metafight down below if you want more of this type of stuff. If you loved this, we do something like this almost every week. Sometimes it's more lecture style like this, sometimes it's VOD review, sometimes it's meta review. But if you want to see this type of content on the regular, I just can't always post it on my regular channel, and more long form stuff as well on that as well. And we're gonna be doing way more going into set 18, and check out my Twitch as well. All right, thank you guys for watching. As always, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.